Good afternoon from a sunny England. I'm live here with Torin Ingham, talking about the sci-fi series that he has created. So delighted to be chatting with you today from where in America?
Uh,
Where are you?
Central America, Iowa,
Okay,
specifically.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. Okay.
Not,
I'm
well, it's Central United States, not Central. Yeah, sorry. It's
okay. Okay. Somewhere in that
Middle United
big
States.
big area. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm yet to visit the country, so I my we my husband and I every 6 o'clock when the cricket's not on, 6 o'clock every evening we watch Richard Osmond House of Games, and one of the which is such fun, one of the games they play is Where is Kazakhstan, and they get a picture of the US and I get them. And Tim's actually pretty good at knowing where the counties are. And I know Florida and I know Washington and I know Canada and Alaska and the
Right.
basics. But ask me where I now I know it's fairly central. I
Oh
might
yeah.
next time they have Iowa, I might be all right. Anyway,
Well, I'm glad I could help with
with
that one.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, you've earned your keep already. Yeah. So we should go back to the beginning. So how did you have you been an avid reader all the way along? How did you come to writing?
Uh, Reader, yes. I started reading historical, kind of everything from,
Mhm.
the American Civil War, World War One, World War Two. That
Mm.
was kind of my introductory into, reading. And of course, throughout school we had to read, kind of the controversial, yeah, pardon me, controversial books where we ended up reading, To Kill a Mockingbird. That was a big
Mm.
book we had to read
Mm.
back in school.
Mm.
And when you read books like that, you kind of take a deeper dive into like how the author came about, writing something like that. And it was one of those where it's
Mm.
like, I wonder what the limits to the writing are then. So then you just start jotting down some short stories and then you progress to having a book out
Mhm. Do you still write short stories?
all the time, all the
Do
time.
you? Do you
Yeah.
think you might do
Anytime I
something
get bored.
with them? Okay. Do you think you might do something with them? Have a collection out or?
At some point in time, I'm sure I will because I've had stories that I have wrote since I was, gosh, probably 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
That back in school, like my favorite one was a story about Sam Hain, the Spirit of Halloween.
Okay.
I wrote this when I was, probably, I said 7 or 8. And
Mm.
it worried the teacher so much she called my parents in because she's like, this is kind of a dark story.
Yep.
Teenagers go
Yep.
into a cemetery during Halloween night and then they disappear because
Mm.
Sam Hain took them and that's kind of where my writing started. Was
Right.
was after that it was like, all right, I'm just going to keep writing stories then.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find when you're writing that if you get to a point, because there is writer's block, whatever you call it, you
Oh yeah.
must have found that at some point you don't know what's going to happen next. Do you have more than one thing on the go? Do you then go off and write a short story and come back to the novel later?
It Yeah, it happens more often than I care to admit.
Okay.
Where you get in that groove and you just keep on going and then you hit that point where you're like, crap. Like
Mm.
you just absolutely run into that roadblock and then you're
Yeah.
you're trying to think and then you'll end up writing 2 or 3 more pages.
Mm.
Excuse me, and then realize that those 2 or 3 pages were garbage because you kept going here and then you just kind of fell off there.
Mm.
And no, you just take your time. You just come back to it when you get right, back in that right mindset. And
Mm. Sure. And hopefully your subconscious has carried on working in the meantime. Because some people
oh, it
will
absolutely does.
literally, one of the authors I've spoken to before, and I know established. I'm not sure if PD James. I don't know why she just popped in my brain, um, but would finish at night when they knew they had to finish partway through a sentence, so
Oh yeah,
that they would literally carry on the sentence that they hoped that their brain would carry on going, while they were asleep, so they could just pick up where they left off the following morning.
Well, yeah, no, there have been plenty of times where you start writing and you hit that point where either your body or your mind just hits absolute exhaustion.
Yeah.
So you stop midway through, and then I've had times where you wake up 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you keep on writing till the sun comes up, and then you realize, oh crap, I got to go to work.
Right, right. Does your work, I mean, I'm guessing 9 to 5, does it then mean that you write at certain times? You write before you, unless you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning with an idea, that you write at certain times, or you have the day job and then come home and write?
Kind of sort. I drive truck for a living,
Okay.
and my hours, I've had times where I've had to wake up at 11 o'clock at night and be on the road by midnight, and
Mm,
then you drive till two or excuse me, drive till 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
mm,
Then you get home and you're so exhausted, you take a quick nap, you do all that stuff, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
once you've calmed down from the day of stress and the work, and
Mm,
you've spent some time with the family, you've gotten some food in your system. Now you finally
mm,
find that peace where you're like, okay, now I can go back to writing.
mm.
So
Anyway, please tell me you're an ice road trucker. Probably
I,
not in the middle of America
well,
necessarily.
during the winter time, you can't really help it, but I try not to
Yeah,
drive on the ice if I can avoid it.
no, because they're we used to watch those all the time. It's just,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Watching that, it,
it's
it really makes you wonder. You're like, yeah, no, I don't really want to do that.
there's somewhat some insanity in there. I know.
Yeah, yeah. It's especially
Yeah,
driving truck and driving in winter, we'll get
yeah,
6, 8 inches of snow, and driving through that's bad enough. Now you add 2 inches of ice to it, and there's nothing you
yeah,
can do. You just hope that the direction you're heading is the right direction.
yeah, yeah. You were talking about you were reading historical books growing up. Is it a genre? Because you write sci-fi. We will come to your books in a moment. Um, y- are you tempted to write historical? Do you write historical short stories, perhaps?
Uh, Kind of a historical nonfiction where you
Hmm.
take historical events, you add a weird play to them. Like I've done, uh, you know, like after the movie Abraham Lincoln, the Vampire Slayer came out. Watching that, I was like, I wonder instead of vampires if it was, like zombies, or you do like this plague, or
Mm,
you take historical events that actually happened and you just kind of throw a weird twist on them, or what if they
mm,
had the technology we had today back then, type of thing. So now you're
right.
dealing with like George Washington and a cell phone. you know
Okay, that's a good idea. Whether when you were saying about zombies, I can't remember who wrote it, but I think it was something like Sense and Sensibility with zombies, which I thought was, I haven't read it, but it's a cracking idea.
it
Yeah,
is, it is, yeah, it's pretty good. And when you kind of break down and think about it, and with everything in the world going on, you're like, yeah, it's not totally out of the picture if it actually did
yeah,
happen.
yeah. Well, it's escapism. Writing is certainly writing fiction is escapism,
Oh,
isn't it? And
absolutely.
why not throw in a few undead?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. At
yeah,
that point, when the limits are only what you can imagine, you just go
yeah,
go wild with it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, those would be within a fairly not limited structure, but a fairly known structure. Whereas writing science fiction, you create your own worlds.
Oh yeah. You
Mm,
you the only limit is what you can imagine.
mm,
And you take modern day science, and but what if something wasn't a solid and was more of a liquid? Or what if, you had this liquid that now in this universe is a solid? Or I mean, the limits are not there. That's the beautiful
mm,
part about science fiction, is
mm,
whatever you can think of is what you write about. And you just write it in such a way that it almost makes sense.
mm. Well, everything has to be, regardless of genre and what you write, it has to be uh, realistic and believable. You know, even if it's
Oh
set on
yeah.
a totally different planet with Vulcans, and this is my
Yeah.
limited Star Trek knowledge. Yeah, it's still hard. And I was just saying to the lady before you that she was she's written autobiographies, and and it's all about the character. I think I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
with your books, even though it's somewhere different, so you've got character setting, plot. You have you. It's. I mean, they say there are only 7 story plots. It's just a lot of variations
Yeah.
on a theme, and authors like Barbara Cartland wrote over 1,000 books, but it's boy meets girl, they can't get together, and then eventually they can get together, which is your the footprint, the blueprint for romance. Um,
Oh, yeah.
Whereas in your world, you can make up, uh, you go beyond human interaction, and but it is ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's about the characters, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. If you don't have a decent character structure and you don't have a you don't have a how do I want to put that? If you don't have a good base and a good character that people can relate to, people
Mm,
aren't going to feed into it. They're not going to place
mm,
themselves in that character's shoes. They're not
mm,
going to
mm,
want to invest their time into, running their mind through the world. And
mm,
I think that's the biggest thing with, the books and, just the science fiction genre in general
mm,
is you got to make it relatable to a certain point, but you also want it to be, kind of out in the world a little bit where
mm,
you find your own place inside that world.
mm.
And that's, no, I love it.
Do you find you put, not necessarily shoehorn things in, but because I kind of, in one of the previous spotlights, we were talking about the how a reader feels by the end of it, and I like to I think we came up with a fourth E. I can't remember what it is, but three E's, sort of to educate, entertain, and emotion. So by the end of a story, a reader will have been entertained, have learned something, which I'm sure even the die-hard sci-fi nut will have learned something from your book, and then have some kind of emotion, hopefully relief that your character is fine by the end of it because they've grown to like them. Do you find with your the genre that you write that you try to, not adding it in because it doesn't suit it, but you want to educate the reader from the world you're building?
In in a sense, yes. The whole Placer series, it is kind of designed to question your moral compass, though.
Hmm.
So there's things in the book that, in a certain situation, a person would be okay with doing, but you're strolling down, city streets or whatnot, and
Mm,
you wouldn't find yourself doing this certain thing. Just because is it morally wrong? Depends on the situation. Is it ethically wrong? Depends on the situation.
mm,
So it really puts the reader in that spot where it's, so if, for instance, if something were to happen to your children, how far are you willing to go? If something happened to your friend, how far are you willing to go? If
mm,
something
mm,
happened to your planet, how far are you willing to go?
mm,
And that's kind of the base, that we built this whole series off of, is
mm.
going, yes, there's terrible things in the book, but they're not so terrible to some people, you
Right.
know, and that's kind of the freedom of the science fiction writing is you can put people in those shoes and make them kind of sit there and go, I don't know if I do that, but if I were in this position, I might.
Exactly. You never know until you're pushed to it, until you
Yeah.
have to make a choice between what we know is wrong and what we feel we have to do in order to whatever the
And that
situation
was
is.
that was the whole
Yeah.
premise of kind of
Yeah.
getting this book out there and
Yeah.
doing everything was you put yourself in a position that you don't want to be in.
Mm,
You didn't ask to be there, you don't want to be there, but now you're there. So what are you going to do?
yeah.
You know?
Well, it's the old adage they say, not exactly in this case, but put your character up a tree and throw rocks at them. So
Yeah.
you've given them an extraordinary situation, and I'm sure as a writer you're I don't know whether you're a plotter or a pantser, whether you learn as you go along what
Oh yeah.
happened. It sort of almost surprises you, even if you plot, that it
Yeah.
almost surprises you actually. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea.
All
So
the time.
are you okay? Do you outline before you start writing?
You kind of run you kind of run what you want to happen. And then as you're going along, you start filling in the details, and then you're like, well, maybe, that's why my father was such a crucial part of this, is because, you
Mm,
call him up on the road and you're thinking about this and you go, what if this happens? And then he goes, well, what if they did this? And you go, oh, it's a really good idea.
mm,
So now that completely changed the course of what you had planned, but you still want to
mm,
end where you wanted to end. So now instead of it just being a straight line, now you're doing one of these, trying
yeah,
trying to get to your point. Then I think it makes the book so much better is when
yeah.
you have the outline, but you barely follow it.
No. Has your end ever changed? Have you? I know we're only we're 2 books along, but have you sort of thought it would end a certain way, and when you got there, you found it changed?
With the first one we did, when we originally published it back in 2017. It had a slightly different ending, but still kind of the same. We,
Mm,
going through and talking it over the last, couple of years, we've made it a little more dramatic in a sense where it leaves you on the cliffhanger where it makes you want to read more, because yeah, you can absolutely pick up the first book and be done with it and kind of
mm,
have a good baseline of the character structure. But we wanted people to want to read the second one because they're like, well, maybe they did this or maybe they did that. And it's like
right.
you can let your mind run with it or you can find
Yeah,
out.
yeah. And do you find you write the first draft and then you go back and edit it, or leave it for a while? And does your dad help with the editing side of it?
Crucially, yes, because
Right.
once you start writing, you have the whole story in your head, and
Mm,
you'll forget simple words like and a or the. So you
mm,
just start writing, and I'm not one for typing, so I will handwrite
okay.
everything.
Okay.
And then you'll have to go back, you'll have to type it up. And in
Yeah.
my handwriting, I'll sit there and be like, why does this sentence not make sense? Like me reading it, it makes perfect sense. But then my
Mm,
father sitting there reading it going, you're missing like 12 words in the sentence.
okay.
And then he'll sit there and go, oh, you meant this, and be like, yes, that's
Mm,
exactly what I meant.
right. Right. And because you know each other already, you can always sort of almost what's the word, ESP, where you're so
Absolutely.
in tune with each
Yeah.
other. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
It's
brilliant that
it's
he
a
does so
blast.
much. Yeah. Can you show us the book? I know you've got it there. Show
Yeah.
us the
Yeah.
lovely
I don't have the
cover.
physical copy. It's just the
Okay. Yeah,
just the
yeah.
book
No,
cover.
that's brilliant. So
Yep.
how
Yep.
did
This
that
was
how did that come about, the cover?
So this was designed by my father. Um,
Hmm.
we kind of had the idea of when we wrote it on if it were to become like a movie or a show, who we wanted to play, the characters.
Mm,
So essentially got the facial structures from who we wanted to play it.
hmm.
And we just kind of ran with it, taking reference from some of our favorite video games, some of our favorite movies and shows and whatnot for, kind of the armor structure and everything else. And
Mm,
yeah, so that's the front cover of her, and I'm pretty pleased with it,
yeah.
to say the least.
No, it's definitely a book cover is supposed to do what it says on the tin, as the saying
Oh yeah,
goes, and that's got it, hasn't it? That was brilliant.
I'm
And
hoping so.
mhm.
That's
So once the book is done and it's edited and it's ready to go out there, do you have any more input thereafter?
um a little bit. You get companies reaching out for you wanting a more descriptive description of the book, so you have to dive into that a little bit. They
Mm,
want some like author notes, they want some editor notes. So then you have to go back in and go, well, okay, how do you describe your own book after you've already described it?
yeah.
And it's
Blurb.
kind of one of those things. And then
Yeah.
after it being republished, we had to go in and completely change everything,
Right.
about the description of the book. So now you're trying to think, okay, how do we take what we thought was the perfect description and make
Hmm.
it better?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
that
it's
was a real pain.
yeah. See, a lot of writers say that writing the book is hard enough, but writing a blurb. So
Oh,
when I'm
terrible.
editing, the first sweep of a book when I'm editing for somebody is I'll do a simple paragraph that covers each chapter. And I kind of think if they haven't written a synopsis, then that will help them write their synopsis. But blurbs, you don't want to give too much away. It's how much, how long is a piece of string? You don't want to put in so much. I've read blurbs before where there's so much detail you think actually I don't need to read it now, especially if they've got the ending.
Oh
Then
yeah.
you think, well, it's a bit like seeing film trailers. They show you so much that you think, well, actually, so I don't watch. If I go and see a film, I don't watch the trailer because usually
Oh
they
yeah.
they so much detail.
And that's the worst part is you want to describe your book in the best way possible. And the best
Mm,
way to do it is by telling the story. Well,
yeah.
you don't want to tell the story because then you're gonna, like you said, when you know the beginning, the middle, and the end, what makes you want to
Mm,
read it or watch it or do anything with it. So
yeah.
you have to do it as vaguely, accurately as possible.
Mhm,
And it's
yeah.
absolutely terrible. I hate doing
Yeah.
it.
So what's next for you? Have you
Uh,
planned? Have you planned a certain point to? Do you know how many books there might be in this series? Because I've your blurb says three, but do you think it could go past that?
yes, absolutely. Because we have
Mm.
way too many characters in the book. So far we actually have 9 books planned.
Okay.
The first 3 are going to be mainly words based
That's okay.
around Placer, and
Hmm.
that'll be what encompasses majority of the first 3 books. And
Hmm.
then from those first 3 books, the next 6 will be characters that will tie in. So if you read the first 3 and then you read, for instance, the next character we're going to be doing is his name is Newberg, and Newberg's story will be tying in heavily into the first 3 Placer books. So as you're
Mm.
sitting here reading Placer's book, you'll come back and you'll go, oh wait, this happened in 1, this happened in 3, this happened in
Yep.
2.
Yeah.
And
So,
so we kind of wanted to do, yeah, do the whole series so that
connected.
everything
Yeah.
ties in. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love the fact because I love Kate Atkinson's she writes crime novels and I did a
Yeah.
college course just to I'd moved area and didn't know anybody, so I went through the college prospectus and it was a 3 afternoon, so I had to take time off work at the time. And they were just literally it was sort of like a book group, but it was a proper study things. So you read it and then it's analysed and you talk about it and more sort of academic book group. And they took her first 3 books and the third one that swung it for me actually was the third one was a book of collected short stories. And
Oh,
I love the fact that one of the characters who was a minor character in story 2 then became a major character in a later one. And I love that in novels. I think there's so much
yeah.
scope if you're writing a series to have plonks, especially if you can, as you say, as you've done, you've been able to go back to your books and rework them. So then characters that you may not have planned on having a juicier part later on can then have their own work.
Oh yeah, and that's the worst part I think is trying to pick the characters that you want to expand upon, because
Mm,
there's major supporting characters that everybody wants the stories, done for.
mm, mm,
But there's also little minor characters like you said, a compilation of short stories where you go
mm,
in, you have, a 30 to 60 page short story,
mm,
based around this specific character that gives you a little more background on them, gives you a little
mm,
more intuitive into their thought process and why they did what they
mm,
did in, book
mm.
1, 2, or 3 or whatever.
Sure.
And it's the hardest part is choosing them because in your head, all your characters are great. Every character you absolutely love.
Yeah.
But there's the ones, so when you go down the tier list, you're like, well, this one is, your main character. Then you have your major three supporting characters or four, whatever it is.
Mm.
Everybody wants to know this story. Everybody wants to know this story. Everybody wants to know this story. But what about the guy that was over here
Mm.
who played a major role, the specific part of the
Yeah,
story?
yeah. He
You
wants
want
to.
to go back, you want to tell his story a little bit, and
Yeah,
you want to make
yeah.
him a larger part. So when people go back and reread, because I'm terrible for rereading. Can't tell you how many times I've gone back to my one of my favorite books, and I've probably read it a dozen times.
Mm.
And you read through it, and every time you read through it after reading the continuation of the series, you're like, oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome, because you make the
yeah,
connection.
yeah.
And that's what
It's
we're kind
brilliant.
of hoping to
Maybe,
do. And
yeah. Maybe there'll be more than nine then. You'll be creating new characters in books
oh, I'm
four,
sure.
five, six, seven, eight, nine that then become major characters. Endless. Yes. Well,
That's
it
yeah.
sounds like a fabulous collaboration. And we would all want a dad who does the editing and the ideas and the marketing and extra ideas and the
Oh yeah.
marketing
Yeah, no,
and
I am very grateful for him doing
yes.
all that. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Oh,
And
pleasure's all mine. I'm glad we got to
we
do
will come
this.
back hopefully in the not too distant future to chat about Placer in more detail and
Oh, I'm hoping so. It'll be
the books that follow. So
oh
there'll
yeah.
be a long list of all these videos as the new books come out, we hope.
Yeah, that's
Anyway, thank you again for your time.
well,
And
thank you.
you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. And we'll speak again soon. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you
Okay,
very
no
much.
problem. You're very welcome. Bye bye.
Bye.